Well, hello there, and welcome to yet another episode of Seat Designers. We're doing this a bit out of sequence, so I don't actually know the episode number that we're doing. I think it might be...
Here comes number 10. Oh, guys! Wait a minute! NXT! It's a perfect 10!
Anyway, by the time you hear this, it's been sitting on the shelf for a couple of weeks, but we promise it'll still be really good. My name, as always, is Frederick Olsen, also apparently known as Mr. Hilarious. I'm joined by my dear, lovely co-hosts. First of all, there's the Space Quest historian, Troels Plejmot, otherwise known as Mr. Interesting, to quote his parents when he was first born. Hello, Troels.
Hello. There's so many things I want to unwrap in that sentence. I'll get back to you later.
Well, before we get to that, there's the other co-host that I need to introduce, and that's the guy whose PhD the chicks be wanting, Dr. Gareth Millward, otherwise known as Mr. Clever.
Are you suggesting I give the chicks the PhD?
Well, no, you just did that yourself.
Well, hello.
I don't want to insinuate that. Okay, well, that's the pleasantries disposed of, because as usual, we've also got a great guest in here, one that I've been looking forward to talking to, and which better way of demonstrating that to him by being 15 minutes late. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Aubrey Hodges. How are you, Aubrey?
I'm doing all right, although I feel underqualified. I don't have a PhD or a nickname, so we'll just have to go with me for now.
We'll call you Mr. Genius.
If you don't mind me saying, your nickname should be something akin to Mr. Made Doom Sound Spooky as all shit.
It's funny because some people still, prefer kind of the original approach, which was a high adrenaline kind of thing. And for me, it was never about necessarily making it different. It was just about working with what I had to try and make sure that the experience of playing it was fun and cool. And I knew that with the tools I had at the time, there was no way in hell I was going to be able to recreate.
Pun intended. Yeah,
right. I wasn't going to be able to recreate the adrenaline with just the MIDI on the PlayStation. So I had to, think of some way to make sure that it stayed cool and fun to play with the tools that I actually had.
So to take it a step back, because I'm sure there are people who listen to this show who will know you, but those of you who perhaps don't know you and think, well, Doom, that's Bobby Prince. What might these people know you from? What games have you done?
Well, I go back all the way to Sierra with the Quest for Glory franchise, King's Quest, Space Quest, just about Freddy Farkas, Frontier Pharmacist, Shadows of Cerberus, really, really old school stuff. Then later came all the Doom and Quake ports and Robotron X and things like that with Midway. And even BioFreaks, which is still one of my favorite games I've ever done. It was a pretty fun game. And then later with EA, I did Madden for years and years and years.
That thing has a soundtrack?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And NASCAR.
It's a good one as well.
Well, all the music to between quarters and all the music at halftime and the game start, all that stuff, as well as some additional tracks to bolster the roster of music that plays here and there that's not licensed.
Yeah, because usually I thought, with games like that, forgive me, I mean, I am a backseat designer, means I'm not actually a designer, but I would figure that that kind of game development has this kind of, we'll just use licensed music, we don't have to pay a musician, fuck it, let's get it out the door kind of approach. It doesn't, apparently.
No, it doesn't. They use the licensed music more as a hook, to kind of pull people in and make it feel culturally relevant at the time and make it feel fresh, especially since that type of a game is sort of done by the year you're in. So it's Madden 2015 or Madden 2017 or whatever. So they like the music to feel like it's now. And so that's one of the reasons they go that way. And they also like to sort of hook into whatever the NFL is actually using that year in live games.
All right, so we're just like 6 minutes in, and I'm already learning a lot.
Well,
The
this is
NFL's
actually a
got its
pretty
own,
nice segue into what's going to, be the main topic, because the reason that we invited you on, Aubrey, is, of course, you have a long and illustrious career making music for games.
You
but
love
one
the word
thing,
illustrious, don't you?
I love the word illustrious, absolutely do, guilty as charged. But one thing that I find interesting upon reading about your career is that you did all these ports of games that have very clear sonic identities otherwise. And what we're talking about right now is kind of like that sonic signature of a sports game. But what I really liked, and, to take it back to where it all began when we started talking tonight, or this morning in your time zone, is that most people identify Doom with this high adrenaline ad-lib metal soundtrack. And you went over in a completely different chord and did this creepy as hell ambient thing. I think all of the three of us agree that it is really creepy.
Yes,
Do agree.
So I do want to go into your creative process and first of all ask you, what's it like to tread the path where Trent Reznor has been or where Bobby Prince has been?
Well, I don't know. I kind of look like when I look at that sort of thing, I really don't focus on what someone else has done, and I never have. Some people ask me, who are your influences, and I don't know how to answer that. I suppose, truthfully, everything I've ever heard. I mean, I know that's a sort of a bullshit answer, but I don't think about things like that when I write. I just try and make things sound cool to whatever my ears think is cool. So, for example, when I started that, my initial instinct was, okay, it kind of went in all these different heavy metal ways and all these different rock ways. What could I do with that? And I thought when we first started, for example, on Doom, that we were going to have the PlayStation's Red Book audio available. But we didn't, because they needed that for streaming the levels.
Oh, really?
So then they're like, well, you're only going to have the MIDI, the little cheesy musical instrument digital interface thing that plays these goofy little onboard sounds or whatever that you can load, and you only get a couple $100K to do it in. And I was just like, holy crap, how am I going to do this? So I started making some sounds, to try and make some of this kind of music that was known in the first game and the original releases and stuff. And it sounded so crappy to me. I was just like, oh my God, this is a Mickey Mouse ass garbage. I can't make it sound cool with this silly thing. What am I going to do? Well, when I was making one of the sounds, I think it was a string sound or something that, kind of holds the glue of the chords down. I was messing with the sample rate, and I thought to myself, man, this is an ugly ass sample. It was sampled at like 8K or something really bad. And I, out of curiosity, I thought, I wonder what happens if I drop the root key way down and play it way lower than it ever should be played. I wonder what all this weird, glitchy aliasing is going to sound like at that speed.
Yeah, and it sounds like a demon having Mexican.
Right, it sounds like a hellish orgy or something, It was terrible. And I thought, oh my God, this is really disturbing, man. This is brown note territory. This is bizarre.
Perfect.
And so then I thought, well, I wonder if I took that high end reverb that's built, baked into the PlayStation, and I ran this low end audio file, output into the high end reverb, if that would make it feel like it was a high-end recording of just really hellish stuff. And it did. It was like, wow, this is a neat marriage between the high-end output of the actual machine and its reverb and these lo-fi, terribly dirty, nasty samples. And then my brain started thinking about, well, all right, if I can't get you thinking about adrenaline when you're playing, what could I make you think? What would be the same hype level or intensity level as adrenaline? And immediately I thought fear. Fear and nervousness and that twitchy nervous energy of of wondering what's around the corner. And
you are in hell, so so that would be a good way to go.
Yeah. So I thought, and everybody's got different play styles anyway. You've got the dudes who are compelled by wanting to just get through it as fast as they can, and they basically just, skip to the end by going as fast as they can, myrtleizing everything in their path, and they're done, and they get to brag about how fast they are. And then you got the people who actually slow down and take their time to, have a look around while they play.
Yeah, and look around their shoulder. That was me as a 16-year-old kid playing Doom. I was just going, okay, I'm going to poop myself any minute now. Please don't come at me. I'm scared.
Yeah, that was me as a 7 or 8-year-old, and I really appreciate what your music does to change the game, because in my opinion, that metal thing that Bobby Prince did, that sounds like an incentive for just blazing through it, and there's blood and fireballs everywhere. Whereas when I'm looking at, I've played the PlayStation version, but it's like a decade or so ago, if not more, and that really makes me look over my shoulder, and there's all this reverb on the sounds, every single the PlayStation kind of has these big sonic spaces because you can add reverb to it, and it's such a different game, in a very good way.
Well, and it's really good to hear that, because the what I was up against, for any professional sound designer out there who understands the terms, when you're trying to fit a bunch of samples into a couple of 100K, including the MIDI file that's triggering the samples, and still have room for sound effects and stuff, that's laughable. I've got a freaking kick drum sample in here that's several meg, that I use in my normal music. So it's almost a sort of comedy, in terms of audio professionalism.
Yeah, I come from a tracker background. That sounds so high and mighty. I've never done anything useful in my life, but I have played with trackers. Let's just put it that way. And that's the same thing. You are trying to get as lo-fi samples to sound good as possible while still being able to fit the fucking thing on a 1.44 megabyte disk. And usually you have to leave room for, if you're doing a music disc, you would have 10 songs on that had to fit in under a megabyte. So I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and so there's that part of it where you're kind of going, well, damn, I've got to really make sure this will fit. So, most people don't even understand that we picked the songs and stuff based on what would fit with the right reverb on the level. It was so bad for space. We had to look, what will fit, which song goes where. Okay, well, which one's smaller? That needs to go there because that level's huge.
I have a little question. We were talking about this before the recording. Most of the track lengths are somewhere in between 9 minutes, 12 minutes, maybe 8 years. So isn't that a lot of sequencing data? I know data is just a byte, but isn't that a lot of sequence data?
Well, the track links are pretty long on the original. You might have been looking at the 20th anniversary extended edition I did that has even longer links, where I went back to the original source material. And
the Quake one had pretty long ones as well.
Yeah, they are pretty long. And my thought process there, MIDI, the actual files that trigger this stuff, they're not that big, thankfully. And so I could go pretty long. And what I was trying to do was make sure that, depending on your play style, if you were one of the people like me who took their time to get through the level and just enjoyed the whole feeling of being in those spaces, that you didn't hear it loop. You didn't hear it repeat itself. And if you did, it was so long by the time you heard the beginning, you didn't know that it had.
You had visibly aged by the time it would loop.
Right. So, and I always felt like I personally feel a little shortchanged when I'm playing a game and it loops after a minute or something. I always feel like, damn, man, the composer really shortchanged me, or they got shortchanged by a producer who was saying, it can only be a minute. And I always want more. So I didn't want the fans of the game to have that feeling. I just wanted them to feel creeped out and unnerved and suspensed the entire time. And I wanted the soundtrack to kind of have its own sort of organic mood as it went through. Because for me, music and the soundscape to any game is always about emotion and mood. Most musicians that have ever jammed with me, played with me, or composed with me understand that I really think about music in terms of energy and mood. I look at it kind of like a language. And so when I'm composing, I'm communicating to you, and it's a language of expression and emotion. And so if I can make you feel uneasy or unnerved or a little rattled or out of your skin, that's what I'm trying to communicate to you. But I don't want to keep harping on the same tone of that. I want to give you different flavors of it. And so that's one of the reasons I went with longer pieces, so that I could give you all kinds of varieties of that weird intensity and vary it up a little bit and ease your mind a little bit and then spook you out again and creep you out again.
Yeah. And smartassery aside, I actually completely I'm on board with this. I like longer pieces. I mean, the original Quake soundtrack by Reznor also had some frighteningly long pieces, and he had to fit that shit in on a. They used Redbook audio for that. But if you're doing ambient stuff, you don't want the thing to loop. Contrasting, interestingly, to some NES type soundtracks where you basically have like a 30 to 45 second loop. Exactly. It basically is the same song that loops every 45 seconds. So you really have another constraint to worry about there, is how do you make that interesting without boring the shit out of people?
Yeah, the Nintendo 64, that was a nightmare, because when I started working on that, they sent me the tools from Japan, and it wasn't even in English, and so I didn't know what I didn't know what the buttons did. I was like, son of a bitch, and I had to write down these damn squiggly looking ass symbols and like, what does that do? Okay, that one does this. Okay, if you press
that was quit program. Oh shit.
Yeah, it's like, if you press the thing with the two lines and then the swirly thing, okay, that that drops the sample rate. Holy shit.
That was the lead.
So I had a funny looking like cheat sheet of what I guess, all the symbols meant and how the software worked, and I'm not sure I ever really quite got it right. And I think a year or two after I shipped the product, I got the English translation version, which was really helpful. But whatever, it's just one of those things when you go first and you're one of the launch titles or whatever, you just got to do what you got to do.
Did that affect your creative process in any way, that the way that you worked with the music itself was kind of alien somehow, kind of disconnected?
I don't know, probably subconsciously. I mean, I was just so happy when shit would work. I was like, okay, I'll stick with that. That works. And it was like, all right, this plays, sweet. Let's make a weird ass soundtrack with this. And one trick I did that, so as I started going down this path of these weird ambient things, I have to tell you, we talked a little bit about creative process. What people don't understand is I don't phone this shit in. There are people who do. They're very talented, they're very gifted, and they can basically write music while thinking about, their favorite television show. They don't have to really be there, and it still sounds pretty cool. And I could probably do that too. But I don't really feel like that's being true to what I think music really is. That's like having a conversation with somebody while you're distracted. So you're really you're not giving them who you really are. You're sort of talking at them and not with them. So musically speaking, when I would do these dark things, I would try and bring myself into a dark place emotionally. I would, lower the lights in the room. I would really try and get in these dark, disturbed mood. I would think about things that upset me, crimes I'd seen in the news, to try and get into this right frame of mind to deliver.
Wow.
And
method acting, but in music.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was disturbing. It got me into a really dark place emotionally for a while, where I'd have to kind of unsubmerge. I'd reemerge and just play some Mario and happy things and Yoshi's.
Go look at puppies.
Yeah, go play with my puppy and to try and get my mind right, because it got me so dark and moody and just snippy at people and stuff. So I couldn't write for any more than a few days before I'd have to kind of take a break for a minute and reorient myself.
That's so cool.
One thing that most people who listen to ambient music, like for instance the original Quake soundtrack by Reznor, or the stuff that you did for Doom and Quake on the Nintendo and PlayStation, is that ambient music is not just a dude holding down a F key for 9 minutes and just having the computer wobble that. It takes a lot of effort, and it certainly takes a lot out of you to have to sit there and mix the shit and really get the feeling right. Because if you're doing non-rhythmic ambient stuff and try to keep that interesting and try to keep this mood going, you're not just submerged in this mood for the 9 minutes that the track lasts. You're submerged in it for God knows how many hours it takes to actually put this shit together.
Yeah, and I will say this. It's weird to say this, but it's true. There were times in the middle of writing this stuff where it bothered me. Like I would be playing notes or chords or a certain dissonance that would really make my own hair on my arms stand up. It was like, what the hell? No, what did I just hit? Holy shit! I think
Wow.
I've gone into Locrian mode, and this is creepy anyway. And man, that is a bizarre sound. What is that? And sometimes I would be working at sample rate sometimes as low as 2K instead of 44,000K. And so the samples would alias, distort and warble and do weird things. And so I sort of started learning the predictability of how the samples would kind of mess up and break up. But sometimes they would do some really unnerving things. And it would be, I'd have to just take a break and get out of my office for a minute because it creeped me out.
Was it like you being like almost like the Jigsaw from the Saw movies, and like I'm actually
Have you
torturing
ever
my
had a
sample.
dreams?
I'm actually torturing my sampler at this point. What am I doing?
Yeah, you do. You kind of get into these negative spots where you're thinking about all these bad things you've seen in the news, and you just can't seem to find a happy rhythm to life anymore. So I thankfully I was able to bounce into other products for a bit and kind of take a break, sonically speaking, from some of that stuff because it was pretty dark stuff.
We're going to get back to Freddy Farkas in a minute. I just wanted to ask quickly, with regards to Doom, especially, you took it in a much more dark and ambient path as opposed to the rock and roll original. Was that kind of a hard sell with the creators of the project, who were perhaps expecting an up-tempo, aggressive kind of thing?
Yeah, it was, and they didn't. It was a bit of a nightmare, and if you talk to some of them after the fact, they'll sing a little bit of a different tune. But when it was happening, they definitely didn't want to do it, and I had to kind of, I don't know the right word, maybe sort of draw a line in the sand without getting into too much detail, and just say, look, it's either going to be this way or it's not going to be me.
Yeah.
And of course, then later when it was successful and people really, really liked it, oh yeah, we were all for it.
What's the timeline exactly? Because when you did the PlayStation version first, right? And then comes Doom 64, which is a unique game rather than a port, but it has your sound stamped all over it. Was that when someone realized that, shit, this guy actually did pretty good work?
Yeah, I think when the PlayStation came out and it sold really well, and a lot of the reviews were positive. They didn't.
John Romero loved it.
They did mention that yes, it's different, but not in a derogatory fashion. And people still like to drum this bullshit up about is it Bobby Prince or Aubrey Hodges? Well, who gives a flying fuck? I mean, I love what Bobby did. He's a super talented guy, and I loved his stuff. And I think he's a great composer. It's not either or. There's both products out there. You can play both. The universe won't complain, And I never understood that. And there's all these forum wars and all these arguments about it. And I don't understand that. I love music. And I love just about all kinds of it, and I love hearing other people's stuff too. So I never quite understood why people want to make it this or that.
Well, that's a lot to do with the. I'm going to go down this tangent and say that's probably because you were attached to a game like Doom that people have this sort of inhuman attachment to. Like they really they will defend it to the hilt, like they're, trying to save a lover from some evil goblin's grasp or something. It's like, no, this is my Doom. You cannot take this from me. What are you doing?
Yeah, people do tend to internalize things like that. And I mean, for me, I don't know the specifics about what happened to sort of land Doom in my lap. I know Bobby and Id had some disagreements and things, and and I was. It kind of came out of nowhere. I'm not exactly sure the politics of how I got into this whole thing, but they were definitely determined that I should be the one to do it, and it was flattering and a little unnerving because of the timeline involved. They really wanted it quickly. And I was pulled off of another product. Maybe it was Mortal Kombat, something or another, that they yanked me off and said, no, we need you on this. And I was just kind of like, wait a minute, Doom? I thought that was id. How are we involved in that? And they're like, nope, you're the guy.
Did you work on Mortal Kombat as well, if I may interject? Because I mean, I loved the music in those games as well, but I didn't know you had any involvement with it.
I started on, I think it was Mortal Kombat Sub-Zero or one of them, and then immediately got pulled off before I could really dig my teeth in. And one of the other guys I assigned it to them. At that time, I was the audio development manager for Midway. So it was kind of weird because it was almost a conflict of interest, because if I had wanted to, I could have thrown myself on every choice project there was. That would have been kind of a dick move, and I never did that. I just spread it out. I'd give one guy Mortal Kombat, another guy, NBA Jam, and another guy Cruising USA, and another, I'd try and spread out the big ass titles so that everybody at least had one. Doom, on the other hand, I didn't really get a say. They're like, nope. It's you. You're going to be the guy. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I'm on that then. And how much time do I have? And they're like, we'll give you 45 days or whatever. And I was just
4 to 5 days. I was just going to say that as a joke.
No, that's what happened. And I was just like, are you kidding me? And they're like, no. And I just kind of went, all right, well, let me go then. Let me just I'm submerging. Leave me out of it. Just don't come into my office and let me make this all happen.
And if you smell any candles and incense burning and you hear some weird rumbly noises, just stay the fuck out. I mean, unless the building is on fire, don't come and get me.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And I might even have set the building on fire myself, but please.
Yeah, and it's funny because most people don't realize I had to replace all of the sound effects as well because of whatever was happening between Bobby and the id guys. And I had to document the process. So I had to make sure that, like, if let's say for one of the, I think the lift sound, the elevator lift, that was pulled off one of the sound ideas libraries. Of course, I had access to all that too.
I recognize that lift sound. It's in Terminator as well, isn't it? That classic lift.
That's very classic. And so I had to find the damn thing. Nobody told me where it was. I'm like, all right, let me see if I can find it. And once I found it, I'm like, aha, there it is at 31 seconds on this, track 487 on this one CD. And then I'd pull it off, and for about 60% or so, I pulled off pretty much 1-to-1, and then changed things a little bit to give it a fresh feeling. And then some of the other stuff, I'm like, well, I really can't find that, or maybe that was an original sound he made. Let me just make something cool, like the plasma gun. I just went in a whole different direction for that. And so, that was a kind of a nice distraction, because whenever I would get in that weird, creepy space and I just feel all tingly and out of sorts because of the music writing, I just jump onto the sound effects part for a while and try and just escape into the tedium of looking for some stupid ass sample.
So when you were giving it a sonic identity, and a new sonic identity in terms of sound effects, then you were more, I'm looking for a very specific word here. It sounds like you were more into what's functioning for this, rather than trying to convey a specific mood. A gun is a gun, so to speak, right?
Sort of. I kind of wanted it to feel a little more, I don't know, it's cliche to say sci-fi, but maybe that's the only thing that really fits, right? I felt like the first Doom had too much organic sound to it. Like it just felt like that's too normal. That's just a normal pistol. Let me see what I can do about coming up with a bigger, meaner kind of feel to it.
Actually, the original pistol sounds like an EDM snare drum, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think I might have used it for that actually at some point. And then when I went in to do the monsters, I just kind of went crazy in the studio. I think all of the monsters are my voice in Doom. And so I just go in there and, with a Taco Bell cup and go nuts, and because
there's nothing to pull you out of a funk than just go screaming into a microphone for a bit.
There's like a recurring theme here of Mexican cuisine, it always comes back to Taco Bell.
Yeah. Well, I think one day I was at Taco Bell and I eat much healthier now, thank God. My blood pressure appreciates that. But But at that time, Taco Bell got into this kick where they were selling cups the size of giant barrels of ale, and this cup had a mouth that, I kid you not, was 8 or 9 inches big, right? And I was just like, wow, this is a huge cup. And it echoes when you kind of talk into it. And I thought, I bet you I could have fun in the studio with this cup. And so that's when I went in there and started making all these crazy sounds. And some of those got used for some of the songs, if you want to call them that, as well, because I made some weird samples that I sort of turned into, I don't know, instruments, as it were.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the instruments or the samples that I'm using, a lot of it was just, me recording whatever the heck I could find at the time. Like one of the samples is a bumblebee that got into the Mountain Dew can that I was drinking. I was almost done with it, and so he was in there, and I thought, oh my God, a bee just went in my Mountain Dew. And he was in there, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? So I put my hand over the thing so he wouldn't get out, and I was going to just throw it away outside. And then I heard the strange sound coming out of the can and thought, oh, my God, I got to record that. And, and so a lot of the sounds, like one of them is my laptop, which was failing at the time, by the way. And I thought, oh, my God, my laptop's going to go out. So I was thinking in terms of taking it to IT and saying, hey, I think this thing's going to die. And then I was listening to the sound and thought, oh, that'd be a cool sound. So I'd record all these sounds, and then I'd record them way up on the keyboard so that when I lowered them down, there was more detail that would come out in the sound. So it's like if you record everything super fast and then you play it super slow, you get a lot of detail because you're recording fast, right? You get a lot of neat stuff that can happen once you play it 8 octaves below what you recorded it at.
I did one thing at one time when I had a friend of mine, sing on a track that I did. It was just a happy little pop punk song, and then I went in to do an industrial remix. I lowered the BPM like 20 or 30 BPM down, and then I put in his vocals again. But then it would time stretch the vocals, so it had this weird, inhuman, robotic quality to it.
Oh yeah,
that's always.
Phasing and all that stuff.
All of that stuff, yeah. And it sounded, and I played it to him, and he said, "That is awful. I hope you never release that." So, of course, I did.
Do you ever take it a step back, Aubrey, to consider that what you were doing at that time was actually very innovative? And since then, we've had so many soundtracks that have had like different sound sources to pull from, like name dropping the great one again, Trent Reznor, and the stuff he's done with The Social Network and all of those movie soundtracks that had come afterwards. It kind of sounds like the same musical DNA to me.
That's a humming kind of evil sounding landscape. Well,
and that may be, I think sometimes. You've got a lot of people that get interested for various reasons in music, and a lot of skill levels out there. And you can kind of break it down along 2 different tracks, right? You've got the artistic part of it, which is the kind of creative impetus behind it. And then you've got the craft side of things, right? Like, how good have you become on whatever gear you're using? And I don't give a rat's behind about what gear it is. You could be on a little sampler. You could be on a Native Instruments Machina. You could be on an Ovation Launchpad with Ableton or however you go about it, right? If you really learn that thing and learn whatever that approach is, your craftsmanship will get you to where you can really communicate whatever artistry you've got cooking around in your brain and in your heart, right? So it's very possible that Trent and people like who look at sound more holistically and look at almost everything as being a possible instrument. That we're kind of coming from the same place as a human being, and as an artist, right? Some people, they want to definitively define their little classifications of music. You see it in electronic music a lot, right? There's like 854,000 fucking varieties of it, and I'm like, really? You have to cut it down that much. You can't just have house. You've got to have deep house and future house. It's like, come on, really?
Oh, it gets really dumb when you get into metal. I'm big into metal, and you will actually see
metal, prog metal, cyber metal, black metal, death metal, doom metal. We got metal with lime. We got metal with slime.
No, but even you've got people who will actively not listen to music because it has an like a core affixed to the, and like, oh, I'm not gonna like this band because it's metalcore. I'm like, okay,
that's for plenty people.
Yeah, and I just don't. I really kind of don't get on board with that at all. I don't know the right way to say it. I look at that and I just think, is that some sort of, I don't know, marketing personnel kind of designation where they just want to classify it into a little box so they can sell it easier or something? Yes. I don't know.
It probably is.
I just don't get it. When I write music, I don't think, oh, I'm going to do a really cool, dub track. Oh, let me make sure it's dub step or club dub, or no, let me make sure it's chill dub or dub step club. It's like, oh, for Christ's sakes, I'm just going to make the track. You stick it in whatever category you want to stick it in. Stick it up your ass for all I care. I'm just going to make it,
Well, I think that brings us nicely onto the subject of happier times with your days at Sierra, and particularly Freddy Farkas, which is a game soundtrack that I really, really like a lot, which does fall into a very specific category of music, which is Western themes, like country and twang and stuff like that.
Yeah, pretty much every Western flavor there was, including some flavors that weren't just Western, but mixed with things. Like one of the gags in that game was that the sidekick to Freddy Farkas was an Indian from India.
Not racist at all.
No, it's just, well, I mean, come on, racist.
No, it's an Allo game. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, it's if we can't laugh at ourselves and laugh at all that stuff, what kind of civilization have we become? So I don't buy in any of that shit.
Absolutely.
But I thought that was hilarious. But then I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So I kind of took the flavor of like a Bonanza theme and used sitar and Indian instruments to do it. And I'm like, okay, this will be a nice, having some fun with the idea and the concept of this game, and the little joke. And there was a lot of musical humor in that game. The ending, for example, was almost like a never-ending ending. It kept having all these false endings, and that was fun to do. I love that kind of stuff. I'm
like one of those Bach false endings where you think, yeah, he's done, and then he just keeps on harping on for like 10 minutes.
I think I kept that going for like 10 or 11 endings. It was pretty funny.
But with Freddy Farkas, you were also working with this limitation that you mentioned previously. You have to make this thing sound good on an Adlib card, a Sound Blaster card, an AWE32 card, a Sound Rolling Canvas, and all this shit. Something
Sound Rolling Canvas.
Sound Rolling Canvas. Yes.
Oh my God, yeah, that it was not fun doing that stuff. My very first Sierra work, I think, was on King's Quest 5. I did all of the conversion work on that. So I had to take, I forget who wrote what, but I had to take the material and then I had to make it really sound cool on like a 3-voice Tandy card and a one beep single speaker thing. And it's pretty hard to make music sound good when you've got a computer beep to work with. Yeah. But I took that stuff seriously. I mean, out of love for my friends who were the composers at that time, and the music itself, respect for the music. I wanted it to be as cool as it could for that person who only had, an Amiga machine or whatever, and it only had 4 notes, and that's all they had, and that's all they could afford. I still wanted them to have fun, and enjoy the music. So I would really labor to make those things good. I even had a little, I don't know, I think it was called Ins Maker, and it was like a patch maker for those silly little sound cards. And I would sit there and massage those sounds as best I could, make that single beep as cool as it could be. Because
light a few candles, get out the oil, and just rub it. Get right in there.
Right. It's all we had. It's all we had back then. And,
all we had were sequencers and oil. That was
pretty much. And I think today's composers are pretty spoiled. They've
No
got.
doubt.
I mean, it's all Red Book. It's all beautiful quality studio stuff, real orchestras, for Christ's sakes. I'm not sure. I think the first time I ever really got to use a real orchestra was the NFL Films Orchestra when I did the Madden theme. And that was 20 years into my career, And nowadays it's fairly commonplace to use a real orchestra. So sometimes when I hear some of the work these days and I hear, the composing and it sounds really lush and beautiful, I'm not thinking it's hard to say it, but I just don't know if I respect it quite the same as that poor schlub 15 years ago who didn't have that, and it still sounded badass.
Well, there's that story of Liam Howlett of The Prodigy, who after they sort of made it big, he got into a studio and he was going to do the follow-up. Sorry, did you say something?
No.
Oh, sorry. I just saw your avatar blink, and it was just like, shut up. I hate The Prodigy. Shut up. No. Anyway, he went into the studio to record the follow-up to The Fat of the Land, which was their breakthrough album. And he just sat there stone-faced and stared at all his gear for a couple of days or something. And he just went, fuck it. I can't do it. I have too many options. And so he just fired up Propellerhead's Reason and did the entire album in just Propellerhead's Reason with standard instruments because he needed that, limitation. He needed some constrictions.
Working with constraints is very nice. Speaking as someone who has also dabbled in music, did you ever consider whether because you obviously get a very different experience when you play something with a Roland MT32 and then with an ad-lib. And Ken Allen is a good friend of ours as well. And we've talked with him about how there's one particular piece in Space Quest 4 which Trolls and I really love the shit out of, which is the Professor Lloyd theme, which plays when you trigger this hologram of the guy telling you about how planet Xenon erupted into apocalypse. And there's this awesome bell patch which just sounds like it came out of the bowels of hell, and there I am talking Taco Bell again, but it just sounds so evil on the ad-lib. And on the other MIDI things, it's just any old tubular bell. So did you ever take time to appreciate that you get very different experiences when you're listening to the music on different sound cards, Aubrey?
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is, right, sometimes those, quote, lesser sound cards would actually be a little more close to what the game needed. It's weird because that happens on Shadow of Cerberus, which was, I think that might be the world's first online game with sounds and music, which I worked on. And that was for the Sierra Network before it became Imagination. And
before it became America Online, and before it became a landfill.
Right, and all the rest of it, the internet turned it into a thing and all that. But this is before all that.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is I almost had a harder time pulling off what I wanted on the higher end sound canvas. And so I actually abandoned trying to support it because I wrote it on the MT32, which is Roland's, at the time, their flagship. And then the sound canvas came out, which was supposed to even be better. It was their general MIDI thing that they came out with. And so I think ultimately someone else may have grabbed it and ported it to that, or maybe even I caved at some point and did my best to convert it. but I never quite could get it to feel the same way. And even now, I'm redoing Shadow of Cerberus with real instruments. I'm going back and playing, violin and cello and all the different stuff and making it the way I originally wrote it in my head. And I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't lose something. I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what do I mean, but sometimes you play to the strength of something. So even though it's a piece of crap little FM sound or whatever, you're writing and you're performing with that sound. And so you do things, idiosyncrasies while you play and ways of writing that make that thing sound cool. But then you get on the real cello and you're like, oh shit, that's not a very good cello line.
Right. Well, it's the It's the same thing with, actually the Adlib card or the OPL chip or whatever was like an instrument onto itself. I mean, you listen to soundtracks by Cocktail Vision, the French developers that Sierra picked up. They were absolute masters at making these spooky, weird soundtracks, and they only sounded good on Adlib and Sound Blaster cards because it had these weird bass, sweepy sounds, and it sounded really freaking evil. And then you put it on a sound canvas, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, rock and metal sounded great on the Adlib as well. I mean, remember the Space Quest 1 Cantina with CZ Top playing? That's awesome on the Adlib because it sounds so metallic. I noticed the Good Doctor's avatar is blinking, and we haven't heard from you in a while, Gareth. I just want to check, are you dead?
Yeah, will you stop talking, please, Gareth? You're really overcrowding.
Yeah, sorry, Aubrey. No, I have been fascinated because I'm not a musician. So I've been fascinated by what's been said and amazed that you did Madden because even though I'm English, I do like a good bit of Madden and I've always enjoyed the music on there. And the orchestra that they have at NFL is really, really cool. It must have been good to work with them. I suppose my main thing that I'm getting from this is that as somebody that doesn't do music but somebody that appreciates it, you tend to find in computer games, as well as you sort of see it in film as well. I think people underappreciate how important music is to the feel of something. They sort of, it's not something that I think a lot of people are consciously aware of, and yet the amount of effort that is put into them and the amount of effect that it has, it seems a bit of a shame, really.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I hate to do the often quoted George Lucas thing where he says sound is 50% of the experience, but he might even be wrong. It might even be more because what people don't seem to understand is that we are built from the very core to respond to music. And we all do. Everyone does. They immediately, viscerally respond to music. You don't have to know anything about it. You don't have to understand any music theory. All you have to do is have a pair of ears. And when you feel it, you know it, and you immediately start connecting with the language of music. It is a universal thing.
It's a good thing deaf people can't listen to podcasts, eh? No, I'm just kidding.
And I think that, it's that universal connectivity when you're playing a game. Immediately, I feel like my job is to help you feel the right emotion for that product. I work on Dragonville right now a lot, in Dragonville World, as I work for Backflip Studios and Hasbro. And that game is all about the feeling of being home and safe and feeling warm, kind of fuzzy, happy feelings, feeling calm, feeling the beauty of the world, because the whole game pivots around making these awesome, cool, little, beautiful dragons that you breed. And so for me, it's talk about diametrically opposed to what I was trying to do with Doom and Quake and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's nonetheless just as exciting, just as fun, and of course, it's Dragonville itself is quite a cultural phenomenon too, with millions and millions of downloads. It's still very relevant today after over 5 years of being on the App Store, which is hard to do. And I mean, thank God for that. These people are some of the coolest people I think I've ever worked with, and so that's also nice to be working with people that you love and respect, but working on a cool franchise. And so for me, whenever I approach any game, Madden or whatever, I try and get into what I believe the spirit of that is all about, right? And sometimes life will throw you a curveball. And I'll tell you a story that I've told before publicly once when the Madden soundtrack was being performed by the Berkeley Orchestra. And I was invited to be a special guest at that event. And it was kind of cool because that was the first time that had ever been performed live. But here's how life can sometimes play a role in how this comes off. So at the time when the EA guys said, hey, we want a new iconic theme for Madden. We want it to sum up the NFL in just a few notes, We want to punch people in the mouth with, this is the NFL.
And you come back with da-da-da-da, and everyone just looks at you.
Well, the funny thing is, so not to get too serious on the show, but this is just life, right? A few days after I was given that assignment, I found out that my 4-year-old daughter had cancer.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's one of those moments where you just kind of, you don't know what to think. You don't know how to respond. And as I started thinking about it, I thought, really, well, there's really two options here for me as a dad. I can kind of fold and just become moody and dark and think the worst, or I can fight. And I can do everything I can to be that positive, encouraging, uplifting kind of voice that keeps us in the right space to win against the disease. And she did. But my role as a dad, is to be the provider. And here was my company saying, we want this badass theme. And so I just threw myself into that theme like a damn vengeance. I was like, well, I'm gonna hit this thing, and this is going to be the anthem for this upcoming fight. The NFL is cool, and I love football and all that, and that's great and good. And here you go, NFL. But it really wasn't about that. For me, that anthem was about the fight that we were going to have, and it's a fight that we won, and my daughter's healthy now. She's still
awesome.
She still has some complications and a lot of surgeries and a lot of chemo and radiation and all that have done a number on her body. But, she's here, she's healthy, she's breathing, and she's a happy, cool kid who loves Harry Potter,
Great.
Good.
But when you go through life, sometimes you've got these things, you've got life on the one hand, and then you've got your responsibilities and your artistic integrity on the other hand. And so sometimes you just funnel life into the thing that you're doing. And so that's one of the reasons I think that NFL Madden theme hit so many people so hard for so long. It stayed the theme for years and years and years, and has been redone so many different times. And I'm just grateful that I was able to contribute in a way, and also, honor my daughter and honor the fight that we were going to be dealing with.
That is an awesome story, and it goes a long way to show how much of yourself you put into your art, and this show always comes back to storytelling, and it really is about the music telling a story, isn't it? Probably not the story people were expecting when they listened to this NFL theme, but certainly, a very important story.
Yeah, I'm gonna pack in my smartassery on that one and say that is so commendable, and most of the art that I appreciate very deeply is for some reason art that has been difficult to create. And my favorite movies are like Blade Runner and RoboCop, movies that people hated working on, and games like Quake, for instance, that people were not terribly thrilled to be developing at the time and such. And for some reason, with hardship can come great art if you don't, like you say, just sit down and sulk and go, well, fuck everything then.
Yeah, and it was hard to not let my heart and mind go there. And as a Christian guy, it kind of shook my faith, and because you have those feelings like, well, wait a minute, I've been praying for her and all this stuff, and why isn't she sick? And that's not what I was told, and But then you work through that stuff and you figure out your answers, and you kind of come to grips with it. But either way, you've got to figure out what mood and what attitude you're going to be sort of bring to the table, right? During that. And so for me, when I started composing, I thought, well, I'm going to flip the script here, and I'm going to try and get into that positive space. I'm going to try and get that energy going. And once I started playing, the theme just kind of came to me, and it sort of would rock in my head all the time, going through it whenever I started feeling a little down. And it's funny because when I listen to the music now, it just brings me back to that time. So I don't know. I do feel sort of like at the end of a long struggle, when you finally get what you wanted or you achieve what you're trying to do, and you come out victorious, but it wasn't easy, and you do feel more scarred for it.
The journey in the music kind of thing.
Right, and so that's kind of what I hear. And when I was at that live performance, I think up on my YouTube channel, there's probably, I think, a video of that performance and everything, in my speech afterwards. And I think the people were genuinely sort of rocked when they found out what it was really about. And I think it maybe made them think about that music a little differently.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is like the
that is a
to
beautiful
the NFL,
story.
effectively. I mean, virtually everybody that has a console and follows the NFL has that game. So it's had a very long shelf life.
Yeah, it really has, and kudos to Tiburon and EA for making such a outstanding game, and I felt really honored to be working on that for so long, and a lot of my work is still there, and they're still building on it, thank God, and some of my dear friends are still there making it. I left, EA not because of any of that stuff. I left EA because I was really compelled to do a fantasy sort of soundtrack, and Kurt Schilling had a wonderful product on his hands. It's a shame it didn't go the way he wanted and the way that they wanted the whole Copernicus thing to go, but
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing about having a tune stuck in your head as you're going through something. I mean, my granddad passed recently, and I spent a week just not feeling myself at all, and I just kept hearing this tune in my head over and over again, just this chord progression, something that doesn't exist in real life, and then when you sit down, it just sort of spills out. You're not even consciously thinking about what keys you're entering. You just go, that was the right note. Let's go from that note to this note, and then it just flows out. And of course, well, my music is absolute shit, not in as opposed to yours, but it felt much like that. So definitely sympathize.
I would never say that. I don't even know if I believe in the concept of music that's absolute shit. And I'll tell you why. Maybe I do. And the only context I would say that music is shit is when music was created for some other reason than the artistry. If you're just sitting there and you're manufacturing music, but you're doing it to make money, and you're manufacturing music and you're not actually sharing with me your heart, your soul, your artistry, and what you really feel, that's shit. I don't want to hear that. Right. I want to hear from you. And if you're some beginner violinist, but damn it, you're playing, Mary Had a Little Lamb with your whole heart, man, that just warms me to no end. I could listen to that shit all day long. I could listen to people who are up and coming artists, and they're up on SoundCloud or whatever, and they're sharing their stuff. And I'm thinking, God bless you. You keep doing that, because that is music. Communication is the music, not the craftsmanship sometimes is beginner, or there are various stages of craftsmanship. But musicianship has nothing to do with craftsmanship necessarily. It just helps you communicate better. It's like listening to a toddler express their feelings. Why do we think it's so awesome to hear little toddlers talk, even though they talk for shit, right?
Yeah, but they're still learning, and they're still putting their effort into it. Yeah.
Right. But what they say is honest, true, and the naivete is endearing. And so when I listen to music from new artists and up-and-coming people, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing honest, true artistry that sometimes is even musically naive, or even naive in terms of life. And I think to myself, awesome, that's cool,
Well, that's exactly why I don't like watching.
That you
never get tired of that one.
You could do so you want him to do you so much you could do anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Don't know what the hell was just said, but I love it.
I don't think the kid who said it knew.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, there's a lot of music out there like that too, but that's cool, And sometimes, it's funny because sometimes I'm listening to, metalcore or something like that, which I love everything from polka to metalcore, right? Everything. And I'll laugh because I'm thinking, this person probably doesn't even understand why they're so damn angry. They probably need some therapy, man. I wish I could sit down and talk to this guy, But I just love that they're so willing to express it, and just be honest. And so I think one of the reasons I listen to certain pop music, I won't mention any brands or artists, but there's some music out there that I feel like is just entirely, manufactured, as it were, for lack of a better way of expressing it. And it has no basis in any sort of artistry whatsoever. And so sometimes when I hear those people referred to as artists, I just can't help but to smile and thinking, yeah, right.
Can I say Nickelback Seat Designers?
No, see, actually, Nick, that's the worst part. Is Nickelback actually had something? No, let's not go down that road. No, I totally hear what you're saying, Aubrey, about putting some actual feeling into it.
Well, it's not even the style. Like, you could do pop or EDM, or you could do any style, right? And if that really is you, and that's you coming off and saying, "This is what I dig. This is what I'm about." Cool. That's awesome. I went to even disco. You want to be Donna Summer. if Donna Summer was really Donna Summer, and what you're hearing is her, cool. Then that's awesome.
Yeah, but she puts herself into it. Yeah. Yeah,
but if it's not, if all you're doing is whatever the producer tells you or regurgitating, then you're just basically a really pretty puppet.
I mean, I went to see Devin Townsend last night, and this is a person who will freely admit that what he's doing is cheesy and it's heavy metal cliches, but he gets so into it, and you can't help but love the man, even if you don't like his music. Which, I mean, to me, how could you not? But yeah. So for me, that's the key, right? Like, look, the truth of the matter is, I'm a commercial composer. I'm paid to write music that maybe I wouldn't otherwise wouldn't do or wouldn't perform. But it doesn't mean you actually have to sell out your artistic integrity to do it. You can still go, okay, Western music, sweet. It's not my thing, but let me just jump in, immerse into this, and figure out why it resonates with so many people. And afterwards, when I finished Freddie Farkas, for example, I had a real appreciation for Western and country music and music from sort of like Oklahoma and, theatrical-based Western music and stuff, Aaron Copland stuff. I liked that stuff, and I never really had thought about it before. And it's funny because around that time period, I really started branching out into pretty much every style of music. I doubt there's a style of music you could say that I haven't listened to and can't appreciate in some flavor. There's some things I gravitate to more than others, and sometimes they almost seem diametrically opposed. For example, I really, really love the Sound of Music soundtrack, and I think Julie Andrews has one of the prettiest voices I've ever heard. But I also love, Black Veil Brides and metalcore, and I also love EDM and DJ stuff live, like Jaws. Yeah. So I just love it. I just love things that are done excellently and by people who really love what they're doing.
We're sort of coming up on the end times, I predict, and you've made some great points. But I mean, and I've, this is kind of a dumb question because I kind of get the vibe from you that you've already answered it through everything you've told us. But if you have any advice for composers starting out in the games industry, just to pull it way back to this show being backseat designers, people trying to give advice to budding game designers, what would you like to tell these composers?
Oh boy, run away? No, I'm just kidding.
You heard it here first, girls.
Look, don't put yourself in a musical box. Don't be a one-trick pony. Nobody likes that. Look, sometimes you can make a lot of money doing that. And if success is all you're after, maybe that is the right way to go for you. But I don't know. Personally, I can't be happy doing that. I like appreciating all styles of music and being very capable in all styles of music. And the more I jump into things and try things out, the more excited I stay about music. I mean, God, I just got some new gear the other day to really infuse and kind of bring my electronic music to another level. I release music under the name Razor for electronic music. And I've got a Razor Jams Bandcamp site now, where I'm starting to release, electronic music that I'm just doing for the sheer fun of making music. But as I get into it and all these, I'm literally trying to immerse myself, not just in the style of music, but in how that music is made using, pad-based triggering and other alternative ways of inputting the music rather than just me playing my guitars or my keyboards. And so for new composers, I would say, don't stick yourself into a box. Don't be one kind of composer. Try it all. There's a lot of joy to be found in all sorts of music, every style, waltzes and polkas and weird instruments and folk and techno and metal and classic rock. And the more varied you get with your style and your approach, the more capable you'll feel and the less fear you're going to feel at the start of a project.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I was at a gig last night, and the opening act, I think, shall remain nameless because I'm about to say something awful.
Yeah, and you can't look it up after the fact, so
Oh, definitely not. No. I was at a Devin Townsend gig, and the opening act was awful. And the reason they were awful was not because they were not technically proficient or because they didn't write good tunes or anything like that. It was because, like you say, they were probably there for the wrong reason. They didn't seem like they were enjoying the music they were playing. They seemed like they were going to go on stage and be, greeted to immense applause, like an avalanche of adoration. And when that didn't come in like the first or second song, you could just see the light go out in their eyes, and they were just, fuck this, another day at the office, let's just get through this. And I was standing there going, dude, you guys, all you had to do was put some soul and passion into it. I mean, go look at the Dillinger Escape Plan play every show like it's their fucking last.
And it nearly was. Hey, sorry.
I mean, if you're going to do music, never assume that you're going to make it big and be famous and all that, because it's not all what it's cracked up to be anyway. Do it for the hell of it. If you can sit down and get some fun out of doing music, I mean, do what I do. Just make shit music in your bedroom and try and tell people about it. I mean, it's kicks.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, at the end of the day, right, you have to live with yourself, and you have to live with what you've made and what you've contributed, what you've created. And you have to, on a daily basis, you have to keep doing what you do. So you better damn well like it. And if you're doing it for all those other reasons, well, go into some other thing. I don't want to hear that kind of stuff, because like I said, that's about the only classification of music I would say is shit music, is music that's just done for other reasons than the music. Because that's not music anymore. That's like false communication. It's like a big lie.
Oh, hold on. Let me send you the link to my Bandcamp, and you can change your mind accordingly.
Well, I think, there's various degrees of proficiency in the craft of making music. There's no doubt about that. And I could go all day about tips and tricks for the craft of making music. But ultimately, the key and the happy convergence point happens when, artistically speaking, when you can deliver what you feel to the other person, then you are there as an artist. Because there's never any there. Bullshit. You're there when you can actually communicate what you're trying to say with somebody sonically.
Yeah.
Now,
Could not agree more.
You can go crazy with that. You could, like, for example, I'm a pretty damn good guitar player. But I'm not Yngwie Malmsteen. I'm not Joe Satriani. I'm not Petrucci from Dream Theater. I'm not, any of these megasaurus players, right? Because that's what they're all about. But I can still deliver you emotionally what I'm feeling with my guitar. Yeah. And shout out to my dear friend Dale Stump, who was one of the best guitar teachers I ever had, and the best person I know. And he still works at EA, so go Dale.
We will track him down and deliver this message to him.
Oh, Dale is
a bouquet of flowers.
Yeah, he's not going to listen to this.
One of the best players I think I've ever worked with in my entire life. And for this very reason, right, he taught me really, when I play, how to put the technique aside and think about expressing myself and not worrying so much when I play. Because I used to be so conservative with my note selection and my playing, and even my pick select. Everything was conservative. I was so worried about making a mistake and looking foolish. And then I realized I'm a fool anyway, so who cares? Just play.
Those are good words to live by.
And so I just play, and if I hit a bad note, well, okay, well, I'll try better next time. But at least I communicated, right? And so like when I'm doing these new soundtracks like Shadow of Serbia, I recently did the Quest for Glory soundtrack, which you can get on my Bandcamp site. And when I went back and played that stuff, I realized, some of that stuff was really hard on real instruments, which is why it took so long to complete that album, because it was hard. I had to learn the tracks again, like how to play them on a real violin and stuff. And my violin chops are meh compared to a real player. I'm nothing. But at least I could play my own stuff after a while, even though it took me 50 freaking takes half the time, and my fingers were literally bleeding. But
bleeding for your art.
Yeah, it sounds corny, but it does happen. It's more like my own fault. No one to blame but me for not practicing enough. But, when you can get to that point where you can actually have a conversation, musically speaking, that's when you that's when you start really exploring the awesomeness that is music, especially when you're jamming with somebody. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was just going to get into that.
No, you were not going to get into that.
Yes, I'm not getting into anything.
Because we have
least of all Selma.
Yeah, we have to wrap up this episode, unfortunately, to stay within to keep the awesomeness within confines that mortal souls may be able to enjoy, or rather go for the 70, 80 minute time span that we tend to go for.
Who are we, fucking prog metal musicians? No.
Apparently, or rappers, really bad rappers. So speaking of
20-minute rap song? No, never mind.
Speaking of, I would if you started rapping, but speaking of exploring the awesomeness, Aubrey, you've mentioned your Bandcamp page a couple of times. Where may people find and purchase your stuff? And do you have anything that you're working on right now that you want to plug on this show?
That you haven't plugged already?
Right. Well, really, aubreyhodges.bandcamp.com is my primary, site to buy my work. There's no Backflip Studios work on there yet, but there may be soon. But it'll include a lot of things like the Doom and Quake soundtracks, some of the Sierra soundtracks as I get to them, and even some more eclectic stuff like my Robotron X soundtrack is up there now. It's pretty fun technos from the, I guess, the mid-'90s. And then my other site is razorjams.bandcamp.com, and that's new. I've only got one song up there, but believe me, more are coming fast and furious.
Cool.
But those are places where it's kind of cool because I can just sort of reach out directly to people and say, hey, here you go. Here's some cool tunes to listen to. And then I'll do extra long versions of things like I did the Doom soundtrack, but I also did the extended edition of it where you get really long versions and some new arrangements of the main themes and stuff like that.
So more for your money, basically.
I
fucking love Bandcamp. It's an awesome site.
Absolutely.
Me too, thank goodness, because it makes it easy for me.
Yeah, so everyone, go buy Aubrey's stuff. I think you've been extremely fascinating to talk to in terms of getting behind the music. It's been really, really great, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for putting up with all the shit you had to put up with because I don't know the clock.
Amateur musicians going, teach us your tricks, master. Pump into our brains. And then Gareth is just over there with his thumbs going, is this over yet?
No. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. No, don't take silence as boredom. Not at all.
So, Aubrey, want to wish... I mean, you've been up very early to do this, isn't that right?
Well, it's noon, so maybe in musician speak, it's pretty early.
Right.
I mean, at this point, the tour bus is still sort of pulling into the driveway, and
in Frank Zappa terms, it's fucking early and horrible, and we have no excuses for putting you through it. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
it's been my pleasure. It's been a pleasure to talk with you guys, and and hopefully encouraging to folks out there who are making music and needing a little encouragement.
No one listens to this show, but thanks for trying anyway.
And on that bobsled, say goodbye, Gareth.
Goodbye.
We got that word out of him. Say goodbye, trolls.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me as well, and we'll see you all next week. So take care.
No more for today.